Hey there everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Shed Insider. And yes, I know I said I'd be on time last week, and yes, I know I am late this week, but couldn't be helped. A few reasons for that, won't go into that. Anyway, reason for today's video is basically to talk to you about kits, because I know a lot of you are probably looking at buying a shed kit rather than getting a full build with a concrete slab and a builder to organise it for you and do the council approvals, because a lot of the shed companies do that. But there are certainly plenty of shed companies and an increasing number of shed companies out there who are also selling kits. Now, one of the ways that shall we say, less scrupulous, perhaps, shed companies are using to sell kits is to make themselves look cheap, which is fair enough. You know, it's a good logical way to attract customers, to make them attracted to their brand, to their particular kit. But the problem is that, look, apples ain't apples in sheds, you know. In a lot of ways they are, because a lot of sheds are similar. A lot of them they've all got portal frames. They all use, 10, 11, 12, 15 degree pitch roofs. They've either got a choice of Colorbond steel in a corrugated finish, or a trim deck stroke monoclad stroke whatever else they want to call it finish, a ribbed finish. They all use C-sections in their framing. They all use either Zs or top hats in the roof frames. They all use tech screws to hold them together. Some use bolts to bolt the frames together. But in essence, they all look pretty much the same. It'd be like if we all drove around on the roads in SUVs. Well, strangely enough, we do all drive around the roads in SUVs, other than those who all drive around the road in utes. Now, you'd know from driving your ute or your SUV that they're not all the same. There are, let's talk about national, there's German SUVs, there are Chinese SUVs, there are made in Thailand SUVs, there are made in India SUVs, there are made in America SUVs, and the same can be said of utes. And they're not all the same. They sort of look the same, and I mean, a ute looks like a ute, and an SUV looks like an SUV, but you and I all know that they're not the same. You know, there are cheap versions and there are expensive versions, and there are cheap versions and expensive versions from within the different countries of manufacture and within the different manufacturers themselves as well. So what makes them different? Well, I guess if you continue on with the SUV or the ute analogy, the difference is what you get with your ute. Now, let's assume that you're looking at an Asian-made ute, and the base model, which is $40,000, comes with electric windows, an automatic transmission, fake leather seats, and a pretty decent stereo and a GPS. Yeah, pretty standard inclusions for a ute. And then the top of the range, which is not $40,000, it's probably going to be closer to $60,000. It's got autonomous braking, it's got a tinted sunroof, it's got a fancy pile of flash-looking screens, it's got all the whiz-bang gizmos that you'd expect in a high-end car, all packed into a ute, and that one's $60,000. Now, they're both going to get you from home to Coles and back. One's going to do it perhaps in a little bit more style than the other, but they're basically, in essence, the same. Now, the same, strangely enough, could be said of a shed. If, let's say, we're talking about a 9 metre wide by 15 metre long shed, they're all going to have C-sections, they're all going to have steel walls, they're all going to have tech screws to hold the walls on. Some will use bolts, some will use tech screws to hold the frame together, but essentially they all look the same. Now, the devil's in the detail. The same with your SUV is the same in the shed. So let's go through some of the things that the devil is in the detail and will make a difference to what you are actually getting with your shed. So let's go back to the ute. Let's say that you bought a ute and you thought you were going to get a sunroof and you were going to get autonomous braking and you were going to get emergency braking and you were going to get a 12-inch screen, you were going to get air conditioning and you were going to get power windows. Great, you've paid your $45,000, you're there, they've got the beautiful big ribbon on the front of the car, you go to pick it up, guess what? The sunroof's missing. The window winder's a manual. The little screen's not a 12-inch screen, it's a little 8-inch screen. You go, oh, okay, well, I can live with that, maybe. You drive it down the road, the autonomous braking's not working because you just about run over a pedestrian. The lane change departure warning's not there because you just about crash into a car that's on your right as you change lanes, and you're thinking, hang on a minute, I thought I was getting all these things with my ute, but I didn't. So the same can be said with a shed. Now, you might think, oh look, all shed companies are honest, they're all going to include all the things that you asked for when you did a quote. So let's go through some of the things that can make the difference between what you think you're going to get and what you actually get in the quote. And look, what you get in the quote is probably should be what's going to be in the bill of materials, and that's what's going to be in the shed itself. So that's number one thing, is you've got to check your quote. So what do you look for? So I've got a little list, it's over on my screen, so I'm going to be glancing over there for a little bit of a prompt to tell me what I've actually got. But here is a basic simple one. So let's talk about windows. Now, okay, let's say you've bought your, what do we say, 9 wide by 15 long shed, and you've asked for 3 windows in one side, 3 windows in the other side, and then 3 windows down on the back end portal. And you want those windows to be 1275 by, 875, standard size window. Now that's 3, 6, 9 windows. So generally those 9 windows will probably come from one of a couple of different suppliers around Australia, depending on how remote you are. If you're way out in the sticks, sorry for the people who live in the sticks, but if you're out in the sticks, your windows are probably going to come from a supplier in Coffs Harbour, because there's not many suppliers that will actually ship nationwide. Now, I know for a fact that those windows are around about $500 to $600 each. So if you're talking 3, 6, 9 windows, let's just round it up to $5,500. There's $5,500 that's in your kit that you're actually getting. Now, you might get a quote from company A, and that might be $25,000 for the kit, and you might get a quote from company B, and that might be $20,000 for the kit. And the windows are showing on the plan, the squares are there where the windows are supposed to be, but what does it say down in the detail? So if you get down into the weeds, into the fine print, into the list of things that you're actually getting, check that the windows are windows. What do I mean by that? Well, the option to having a window is to have an opening. So an opening is not a window, it's a hole. So if all you're going to get is a hole, then your $20,000 kit is not the same as your $25,000 kit, because your $25,000 kit is actually including a window with a slider, and the other one is going to include a hole, which means you're going to have to go and find $5,000 worth of windows. So A and B are not the same. So that's definitely one thing. Check your windows, are windows included, and check if they're just openings. If they're just openings, fine, as long as you know you're just getting openings, but a window is at least, $500 to $600 a window each. So that's number one. Number 2, roller doors. I've heard of stories where people have had a caravan, say for example, which is 3.2 metres high. They've asked for the supplier to include a 3.5 metre high roller door. They get their kit quote, it comes through, they go, wow, that's cheap, it's great. It's only $20,000 again. And then they go and order the kit, and strangely enough, the doors that are included are not 3.5 metres high, they're 2.7 metres high. And their caravan won't fit through the shed door, making it essentially a useless box of metal. So make sure your roller doors are the same as the requested dimensions. And also, if it is cutting it fine, like if you've got a 3.2 metre high caravan, don't buy a 3.2 metre or a 3.3 metre door, because the dimensions of the opening are not necessarily the dimensions of the hole that you can drive through. So there's drive-through clearance and there's opening. Now, you would know from looking at roller doors, like I look at roller doors all the time, at the top there's about 80 to 100 mil that the roller door hangs down below the top of the frame of the roller door. Now, some manufacturers say our window openings are drive-through openings, and some shed manufacturers say our roller doors, you will have to deduct 70, 80 or 90 or 100 millimeters off that opening to get your drive-through clearance. So make sure that the drive-through clearance is enough to get your said vehicle, caravan, ute, my old Land Cruiser with a 6-inch lift and a rooftop tent, that will actually fit through the bloody door. Because if it isn't going to fit through the door, then you might as well just go and spend your money on something else, because the shed's going to be useless. And it's really expensive and really hard to go back to the manufacturer and say, oh, by the way, the roller doors you supplied me are the wrong size. It's your fault. Well, sorry, you signed the quote, you signed the contract, you should have checked it. It's your fault, back on you. So then you're going to have to find a way to fix it. So they're probably the two main things. Again, personal access doors, make sure they're pre-hung. Again, not just holes. Holes in the wall are not doors, they are openings. So make sure that your doors include a pre-hung or a kit to manufacture a door for you. Anchors and bolts, make sure that the shed includes the anchors and bolts to attach it to the slab or the piers, whatever it is that you are bolting it to. Because again, those anchors and bolts can be, $10 or $15 each if you're talking about an 8-inch screw bolt. And then you need the chemical set stuff that goes in the hole with the screw. You take out, well, let's say there's 4 for each post, and you've got your 15 metre shed that's got 4 metre bays, 4, 8, 12, 16, okay, so it's got 4 posts per side, that's 8 posts, plus a couple in the portal ends, that's about 16 posts. 16 posts times 4 is a shitload of bolt holes. It's about 45 or 50. That means you've got 50 bolts that you've got to buy at $15 each or $10 each. There's another $500 on your kit. So, $500 on your kit, when you're talking the difference between, again, a $20,000 kit and a $25,000 kit, doesn't sound like much, but it can mean the difference between you making a decision with company A and you making a decision with company B. So ask for a bill of materials or check your inclusions very carefully. There's no reason why a shed company can't include a bill of materials, because most of the software produces engineering, and the engineering includes a bill of materials with every kit. Now the key is knowing what it is that you're looking for in that kit. So hence the reason for this video, and that's what you need to look for. So you need to look to make sure that your windows are openings, your roller doors are the right size, your bolts are included. Same thing with screws. Look, it's a tiny little thing. Tech screws, some have got little neoprene washers on them and some don't. And look, it might be $100 difference in the cost of the kit, but if you don't have neoprene washers in your roof screws and your wall screws, they're going to leak. So make sure that they include what I call Neos. No, nothing to do with that movie that included Neo with him floating around with bullets or any of that sort of stuff. So they're little neoprene washers, make sure they're included. Now the other things to worry about are, make sure that your kit has site-specific engineering for your exact site. These days, the shed company should be able to give you a wind rating down to 1/10 of a metre per second in wind speed. So your shed may be engineered for a 45.7 metre per second wind speed, which somehow calculates into an old-fashioned N rating. But don't buy a shed with an N rating. I mean, N ratings are old hat. It's like buying something that's 6 inches tall, not 150 mil. N ratings went out, not with the Ark, but a specific wind speed rating can make the difference between your shed standing up in the next storm and not standing up in the next storm. So make sure that the manufacturer is giving you a site-specific engineering, and also make sure that the quote includes the wind rating. If not, ask them for the report, because all the software producers, all the software companies that make the software for the shed kits, all produce reports that they can include with their quotes, because it's part of the way that they actually calculate the site-specific engineering. So if they can calculate it, guess what? They can give you a copy of the report. So no reason why you shouldn't ask them for that. Look, make sure you get trim, barge capping, flashing, gutters, downpipes, all those sort of things make a huge difference. One of the other big things is vermin flashing. So look, I wouldn't buy a shed without vermin flashing, given that it is so inexpensive. It can add, I don't know, $300 to the cost of a shed, $400 to the cost of a shed. It's going to help keep out bugs and snakes and snails and worms and all sorts of nasties that you really don't want crawling inside your shed. Rats, mice, those sort of things as well. Obviously, you've got to keep the roller doors down to keep them out, because I've had people, put the vermin flashing in and then wonder why the shed's full of rats and mice. Oh, do you close the doors? No. I don't know why they don't think that the vermin are going to find their way through the roller doors. Anyway, that's a story for another day. So vermin flashing, make sure it's included. Look, doesn't really matter whether it's PVC or galvanised or Colorbond colour. That's pretty, it all does the same sort of stuff. Insulation, again, there's a huge difference between the different types of insulation. Some companies will use really skinny budget 6mm bubble insulation, which, it'll help. But given the difference in price between 6mm and 10mm, which really does help, I'd be asking them to give you the exact thickness of the bubble insulation. Ask if it's overlapped or if it's butted. Again, doesn't make a huge amount of difference, but it does make a difference between having 4mm insulation and 10mm insulation. There are other types of insulation I've not had a lot to do with, like foam type insulations. Roof insulation in a shed is designed to reflect the sun's heat from coming through the shed and into the airspace underneath. So it's designed to bounce that heat back out into the atmosphere instead of letting it through your shed. So the type is probably not as important as the thickness and the effectiveness of the insulation itself. But make sure you put the insulation in when you get the shed built, because it is not the easiest thing to do to put it in afterwards. It requires that you take the roof off, put the insulation on, and then put the roof back on. So that is not something that you want to do with your shed. And it's really difficult to put pink bats and things like that into the roof of a portal frame shed, because it requires roof wire. And again, roof wire is generally fitted at the point that the roof goes on, because it goes between the purlins and the roof itself. So, insulation, if you're going to do it, if you can afford it, if you can find the money to do it up front. Whirlybirds, you can add those later. Solar vents, which are better than whirlybirds, you can add those later. Insulation, do it up front. I wouldn't buy a shed any further north of Sydney without insulation in my shed, given the temperatures that we have in Australia, particularly in Queensland. So there you go. So there's a little bit of something that you need to worry about. Look, I'll talk at another video about the origins of the materials that you are getting from your shed manufacturer. So whether you're using blue scope steel or whether you're using imported steel, because that can make a difference. And look, honestly, you're not going to know the day that you get your shed erected. Look, a big trim deck shed looks like a big trim deck shed from the outside. I'll come back and ask you in 15 years' time, when my shed that's made out of Australian steel is still standing and it doesn't have a spot of rust, how your shed's going, and you've had to replace sheets because they've rusted after 5 years, and your galvanised frames are showing surface rust, or maybe something a little bit deeper down near the ground where it might have got wet, or it's been hit with a bag of fertiliser or something like that. So, you know, they can make a difference long term, and that will be a subject for a future video. So just restating the obvious, or restating all the things we talked about. So windows, make sure the window is not just a hole, it's a window. Make sure that your roller doors are actually what you asked for, and that the height of the roller door is the clearance that you need. Confirm that your personal access door, again, is a door, it's not just a hole. Ensure the anchors and the bolts are included in the kit. Check for site-specific engineering. Verify the inclusion of trim, barge capping, flashing, and that the bolts have got the neoprene, the neos on them. Make sure your gutters and downpipes are part of the package. And put the insulation in, and ask about what the quality of the insulation is. Look, you're going to pay a certain amount per square metre to put it in. You might as well spend the extra few $100 to get something that's actually going to do the job, instead of something that's just, you know, designed to add a profit margin for the manufacturer. So there you go. There's a few things to think about when you're getting your next quote. I'm going to put a checklist together with all those things on it. If you'd like to get a copy of it, comment down below, and when that is available, I will let you know in the comments, and you can get a copy of that checklist. In the meantime, this is David, the Shed Insider, signing off. Have a great day, and I will talk to you next week. Hopefully next week, not in another 11 days. So anyway, have a great day. Talk to you soon. Bye.